Hi biology folks, I want to go ahead and look at week 2's assignments. I'm going to go ahead and go over the answers. They are already all graded. I'm in the process of putting them in areas so you know your true science grade, but if you want to know your grades on the assignments, go ahead and go into Google Classroom. You can pull them up, check your answers to see that you have the correct ones, and we can go from there. So this week we were looking at systems and models, and we had 2 days of that. If we looked at the quick write, we were supposed to look at a picture of a caterpillar and a tomato plant. So the question was, how do you think tomato plants detect pests on neighboring plants so they can protect themselves from infestation? Well, the tomato plant can sense the chemicals the other plants produce, and so then they're going to go ahead and do the same chemicals to protect themselves. That was the quick write. The Zoom class discussions, I know that we kind of had them as a discussion point, but since we did have them, and you were going to turn in this document, I did want you to actually type in the things that you talked about. So if I put a little like question mark, or I highlighted it, if I highlighted it and put a question mark on it, that's me saying, oh, you didn't really answer these questions. You can go back, answer the questions, and resubmit it. Because this is kind of the first couple of weeks of getting everything together, I'm not going to penalize you for wanting to redo something and get more points. Obviously don't get behind on the current items, but if it's really bothering you and you want to go ahead and fill in those questions, you can email me and then we can work that out with your grade. So question number 1 was talking about what systems can you define in the world around you. So we have computers, TVs, Xbox, refrigerators, cars, microwaves. These are all systems that just come up at the top of my brain. Question number 2 was talking about thermoses. Is it a closed or open system? Technically, it's an isolated system because no matter and no heat is being transferred. That's the whole point of these like amazing thermoses, right? They keep your beverages hot for a very long time. If we're talking about a closed system, that would be, let's say you have water boiling on a saucepan and then you put the lid on it, that would be a closed system because the water can't evaporate and leave. It's all enclosed. An open system would be that same boiling saucepan with the lid off, and then the water can evaporate and go away. Open system. What evidence do you have to support your claim? The evidence is that the thermos is going to stay the same temperature. It's not going to get any colder. So then the last question was about that thermostat. The first one is going to be the air reaches 79 degrees. So that is letter E. It senses this increase in temperature, letter D. The air is going to go ahead and turn on, letter F. The air reaches 78 degrees, letter B. It senses that temperature drop, letter A. And then finally, the air turns off, letter C. So that is the thermostat order. Basically, the temperature has to get higher for it to sense it so that it can turn on, get lower, sense that it gets lower so that it can turn off. Speed round. For the independent work, I was talking about the scuba gear. So how do those two systems interact with one another? Well, the person needs to breathe, right? And the gear makes that happen. That's just the interaction. The person's breathing underwater. We can't breathe underwater normally. Scuba gear helps us. What are the inputs and outputs of those things? Well, we breathe in oxygen. We breathe out CO2. The gear is giving us oxygen, so that's the output, and it is giving input into CO2. A lot of people just said air, so be a little more specific. We don't just breathe air. What specifically do we need? That's what I was looking for day 1. When we were looking at day 2 of systems and models, there was a picture of DNA. And we were saying, what's the purpose of making models? That was question number 1. Purpose of making models is so that we can understand them and study them and learn more about them. Why were there 2 models? This one was a straight DNA strand and this one was a twisted helix. Perhaps one of them we want to see what a real DNA model looks like, and the other one we'd want to see specifically those nitrogenous bases. So that may be a reason of having those 2 models for different functions. When you looked at the breakout room cooling down question, how does the body reduce its temperature after getting hot? Well, we sweat evaporates, and then that process is what cools us down. I didn't realize that I had the temperature thermometer question in 2 places, so we already went over those answers. The second to last one on this page is that oak woodland area, and we're looking at the boundaries and all that. So the boundaries, if you look at it, it's the sky, it's the grass, it's the oak trees. If you were to kind of claim this area and say, I'm going to claim this area, you have to kind of specify the boundaries of it. And you could describe it by saying anything that has this yellow grass in these specific trees. Once it reaches other specific trees, maybe the grass goes away, that would kind of end the boundary of that area. The elements found in this system: oak trees, we have the grass, we have the dirt. Input: the trees, they're going to go ahead and take in CO2. They give us oxygen. And that whole process is photosynthesis. Last question was the independent work, and it was saying, how could you model that relationship between the caterpillar and the tomato plant? You could do a drawing. You could create a diagram. And then in that diagram, what are the inputs and outputs? Inputs: the caterpillar is invading the tomato plant space. So that's the input, caterpillar. Output: tomato plant doesn't want the caterpillar. So it's going to produce those chemicals to protect itself from the caterpillar. The interaction is the caterpillar and the tomato plant being in the same space. Those are all of the answers going over last week's weeks 2, day 1 and 2 assignments. If you have any questions, you can go ahead and email me and check your grades, but otherwise that's all I have for this week.